and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Time for us to once again check in on the bizarre DC miniseries for Star Trek The Next Generation. That had a three-parter in the middle of it. Previously, after the Enterprise encountered a literal race of Grinches hunting for Santa Claus, which, come to think of it, does that mean that the Grinch from the Seuss story was actually in exile from his people, or did the Who's in Whoville invade and colonize the Grinch's homeworld? Would certainly explain why he was so pissed off at them. The crew was visited by Q, an omnipotent being and recurring character in Star Trek who is either around to test humanity to see if they're worthy of reaching farther into the galaxy than anyone has ever seen before, or to play impish tricks on people, sometimes just because he's horny, which would imply that the finger-snapping thing he does is actually a mating dance among the Q. Speaking of other members of the Q Continuum, said Continuum decides to do a test of their own on the crew after they're separated, seeing if Tasha Yar will take revenge on someone she was a victim to previously. Deciding not to makes them see the value in humanity, and thus they strip Q of his powers. Q, going nuts as a result of this, grabs a phaser and accidentally shoots Geordi dead. Unlike in Doctor Who, in Star Trek when someone dies, they don't regenerate into a different person, but into a different profession. That's why Geordi ended up the chief engineer after being a helmsman previously. These comics have terrible writing and bizarre as all hell over-the-top artwork as people pose ridiculously. Will that streak continue for the final part of this three-parter? Well, let's dig into Star Trek The Next Generation number 5 and find out. Compared to the other covers we've seen, this one's actually pretty restrained, much like Q himself is being restrained by Worf and Picard. Tasha, do you want to call for some security officers to come help? Because right now, your captain is doing your job better than you. Nearby, the rest of the main characters have gathered around Data, who's holding the dead Geordi in a La Pieta pose. Although the artistic weirdness here is in Geordi, who is either melting or is actually some kind of literal ragdoll, considering how much his body is drooping down. Seriously, I actually suspect that Q vaporized his spine with that phaser with how his body is shaped. Even in death, Geordi feels the need to JoJo pose. DC Comics aren't just for kids! Yes, but considering last week's review, it does make us question who the hell they are for. We open with the saucer section returning to the Enterprise and redocking with it, which I guess doesn't actually need any of the bridge personnel to handle that, since it's being done while the rest of the story continues to unfold. Captain's Log, Stardate 41753.3. Which, according to that stardate, means this issue takes place before the last several.
Let's do the time warp again!
What's funny is I'm actually singing that in the clip, yet I'm mouthing it here. Pity I can't put it on a DVD. Maybe a CD if I'm lucky. Or streaming. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Stardates. Much as I joke, I should probably cut the comic a little slack there on them being out of order, since, based on the Stardates in Season 1, some earlier episodes that feature Tasha Yar take place after she was already killed.
Space is warped and time is bendable.
On a fairly routine mission to document the questioned existence of the legendary planet Faltos in Sector 902, you know your missions are too damn exciting when the idea of seeking out a planet that exists only in legend is considered a routine mission. What's Starfleet got for us today, Captain? Oh, just looking for Atlantis. So, just like last Tuesday when we were looking for the Holy Grail. The Enterprise and her crew encountered a renegade starship and the omnipotent entity Q. As a safety precaution, the saucer section of the ship, along with non-commissioned civilian passengers, was jettisoned. Subsequently, the saucer was lost in space for several hours and has since inexplicably returned and rejoined the star drive section of the Enterprise. Turns out the saucer section was actually inside my pocket, and it wasn't lost at all. My keys still remain nowhere to be found. Simultaneously, and perhaps as a direct corollary to the saucer's return, Q has discovered himself stripped of any and all powers he once might have possessed. Distraught, Q attempted suicide. Not over his lost powers, he just never liked the saucer section of the ship. But, in a struggle to prevent such an action, Lieutenant J.G. Geordi LaForge has been struck down by phaser fire meant to destroy Q. Red shirt deaths now affecting main characters. Should he recover, recommend he upgrade to a gold uniform. Here's a weird one I have about that sentence. He specifically calls out that Geordi is a lieutenant junior grade, even though there's no reason to say so. As far as I know, the rank is still just referred to as lieutenant, yet the only other time I've heard it specifically called Lieutenant JG like that was in a toy commercial for Galoob Next Generation toys. Was that just how they listed them in the promotional material and nobody actually knew what it meant? Also, we get the title of the issue, Q Effects, which is spelled with an A in here, but an E on the cover. Because poor literacy is probably a sign of a bad editor. Also, geez, someone might want to do something about the Q on the inside title. It's so sharp it's stabbing through the rest of it. But yeah, Geordi is dead and Data is examining his body. This is impossible to accept. My friend, one of the few to treat me as if I were like him, as opposed to the other people on this ship who have nicknamed me Igor because of this hunch in my back. And then, well, I finally decided to look into the dates of when this comic was produced versus when the show was on the air. Now, as I've said before, Season 1 of The Next Generation is wonky. They were still finding their footing, the dialogue was often forced, or they were trying to write a 1960s aesthetic, but in the late 80s. Basically, the whole thing is so bad it's good at best, and while Season 2 improved on a lot of things, it was Season 3 when the show finally got its act together, so it's easy to see why that same wonkiness is viewable in the comic. For those who don't know, comic books are usually worked on and created several months in advance of their release. Even the date on the cover is usually inaccurate because that's actually supposed to be when the retailer is meant to take them off the shelf, usually about 2 to 3 months. Assuming about 3 to 4 months of lead time to create the comic, then this one was initially written and drawn right around the middle of Season 1. And I've got to imagine that by that point, someone would have raised their hand and said, yeah, that's not how these characters act. Why do I bring this up? Well, I'll let Data himself express his confusion over what happened.
I got angry.
Yeah, Data gets pissed off at Q and leaps at him and starts strangling him and beating him up, screaming for him to bring Geordi back. Now, I have always contended that Data does possess emotions because curiosity, having wants and desires, like his quest to become human and the like, are all emotions. But I'm pretty sure murderous rage was not a regular thing for him. Maybe I have to marathon the show again, I don't know. Also, considering Data's own strength level and how out of control he is, I'm pretty sure Q's face should have a big android fist-sized hole in it. Geez, Cisco punches him one time and Q never returns, Data punches him with mega strength and Q's still happy to come back. I don't know how to take all that. Picard and Worf are unable to restrain Data, but Picard finally gets him to stop by telling him to talk to the hand. Of course, sir. You are right. I'm an android. How have I let myself go like this? Have you been browsing the internet without your virus scanner enabled again, Data? Q insists that Picard let Data kill him over what he's lost. I do find this sequence amusing from a meta perspective because there is a great episode in Season 3, Deja Q, where Q is kicked out of the continuum and made human, leading to a situation where Data acts as his guide to humanity. Probably the only person on the ship who would have the patience to handle him, so having Q try to get Data to murder him is just wonderfully surreal. In any case, Picard says he can't understand what it is Q's lost, but Commander Riker enters with the rest of the Saucer Section crew to speak from his perspective, having once had the power of Q and lost it. Q once gave me a chance to wield power such as his. I like to think that had I chosen to keep it all, I wouldn't have caused quite as many problems as this Q has. First thing I do, grow a beard. Then maybe learn how to sit properly in a chair. Riker tells Q that his desire to die is overreacting, that losing the omnipotence of the Q just made him appreciate humanity all the more. Yeah, but it did force Riker to ask some very pertinent questions about life.
What's the right tip?
Can you remember the tallest man you've ever seen?
Have you noticed how many successful restaurants are theme-based these days?
Dr. Crusher has Data take Geordi's body to sickbay, while Wesley hangs on Data's arm like he was friggin' Gollum or something. Picard tells Q that he's gonna be imprisoned along with the other people he recruited for this whole weirdness. Reg Lech, the douchebag from Yar's past, insists that he'll get back at Q for all this, even kicking him while he's down. Thanks to you, they got me now, Q. But I swear, I will find you and make you sorry you picked Reg Lech to Prue for one of your games!
Oh, please.
While Reg Lech is being hauled to the brig, why did Yar bring him to the battle bridge anyway? Q insists that if he's not going to be put out of his misery, that he should at least get some medical attention for all the beatings he's endured. Worf says that they should just let him suffer for all the crap he's pulled. Not just with them, but no doubt making other species out there suffer. Perhaps Worf. But maybe Q feels he had reasons for his actions. It's totally okay if he tortures people and puts others in harm's way as long as he had reasons for his actions. Picard wants to know why exactly Q wanted them to think they were fighting hostile aliens back in issue 3 as opposed to the human colonists. He said it's because he was desperate. The Q were growing more and more interested in humanity since it started revealing its true potential in recent times. You produced 2 Nickelodeon movies based on 20-year-old franchises, and yet neither were terrible. In fact, they were really good. If Starfleet brings back digital watches, humans will become gods! Q further explains that his task was to bring humanity into the Q. Riker was supposed to be the first, but when he rejected the omnipotence, Q didn't have anyone to show for their efforts, and they were pissed at him. To try to placate his bosses, he figured, hey, why don't I just bring everybody on the Enterprise into the Q? Yes, your vessel is manned with the finest humanity has to offer. Well, now you know that he's lying, because that includes Wesley. Also, what about all the people on the ship who aren't human? Like, Data just tried to murder you in revenge, Worf thinks you should suffer in pain, and the Christmas issue implied there were like hundreds and hundreds of other species on the ship. Also, the Bickleys were great examples of humanity? Or are they aliens too, given their uniforms sometimes have capes? Q faints from exhaustion, and Troy just decides to read his mind to finish what he was talking about. Oh, another great example of humanity. Reading your mind without permission, and not trying to help the man who has passed out. Q was concerned that every time he visited the Enterprise, he was becoming more and more human himself, and thus making errors in judgment. Not a bad self-assessment considering his decision throughout these issues to just swap cosplays every few pages for no reason. Troy and Riker haul Q off to sickbay, and I guess Worf and Picard are left alone on the battle bridge. Worf wonders whether they should be so accepting of Q as a human amongst them, given his track record. Worf, I seem to recall an entire race of formerly malevolent beings being welcomed into the Federation in a similar fashion not very long ago. Yes, Captain, your point is clear, but it is that very Klingon background that's making it hard for me to like this. Especially since, you know, the Klingons aren't a part of the Federation, they're still a separate empire, we're just allies. Also, that was an incredibly bigoted thing you just said. Not sorry, Mr. Worf. As the formerly omnipotent being just said, we are the best of humanity and worthy of godhood. Later, in sickbay, we get an update on Geordi.
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead.
Well, he's in critical condition at least, but Dr. Crusher is tending to Q, while apparently taking inspiration from him since now she's cosplaying as DC's own Cyborg. Great, so Cyborg can be on the Justice League, in the Doom Patrol, he can even be Dr. Crusher, but heaven forbid he be a part of the damn team he started with, the Titans. Data is confused why they're spending so much time trying to help Q when Geordi's in such bad shape and, you know, Q's the one who did this to him. Data, no matter what Q was before, he is a man now. He is a man! Huh. That's weird. Nothing happened this time. Does Wesley have, like, school or something? Why do they keep letting him hang out with them when they're on duty? For that matter, what the hell's with how formal his sentences are? But Q was so malevolent. He would not have done the same for us. I'm afraid that that is not for us to judge. Fortunately, I'm a critic, so I'm gonna judge the hell out of you. Data asks Troy to see if Geordi's consciousness is still there, and indeed he is. It makes me mad. In ways, I am the ultimate man. I am the ultimate man! Okay, seriously, that's twice in one episode now, and nothing has changed. I haven't done it in a while. Is it broken? In you, Data, I can feel much fear and confusion, as well as anger. Now, you might think, oh hey, they finally remembered that Troy is an empath and not a telepath. But she's getting this from Data, the one who she shouldn't be able to read, so I'm guessing she's just faking it. She thinks he should take some time away from sickbay for a bit. Come on, Data, what do you say to some hollow ball? That's just their name for when they throw wiffle balls at him. Doctor's son's orders.
Shut up, Wesley.
Cut over to the detention area where, oh, come on now. The emergency helmets weren't enough. Now apparently security personnel aboard the Enterprise wear white Darth Vader helmets.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
Like seriously, you couldn't even color code them to match the uniforms or something? In the brig, Reg Lech and his men are arguing over how he abandoned them when the Enterprise got a hold of them, and they want to beat him up in retaliation. And I'm just like, wait, there are 5 of them in a single cell? It doesn't even look like they have a bathroom or a bed or anything in there. And check it out, there are a bunch of cells in this area. Did they have to be all stuffed into the same one? How rowdy is the crew of the Enterprise if they're all occupied? Anyway, because of the fight, the security officers run in and open the force field door. Naturally, this is an incredibly stupid idea, and you'd think they'd have, like, some way of gassing them or something, but nope. They just open the force field and get their phasers ready, but Reg Lech shoves one of the prisoners at them, which allows them to escape. Sloppy, Rivera! They're backing out! Don't go blaming him, dude. Neither of you are gonna have a great performance evaluation when all this is said and done. I've got him, sir! They won't get away! Dude, you're lying on the ground and trying to reach for them. Unless you've got a force choke ability, maybe get off your ass and shoot them with your phaser! Then again, it's not like Reg Lech is wowing us with his escape attempt. His plan? He grabs one of his own men to hold as a hostage. Reg Lech, please! They'll stun me! And his other compatriot says this is brilliant. What a great plan, Reg Lech! The utmost!
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
The utmost what exactly? The utmost great plan? Or is he calling Reg Lech the utmost as some kind of title thing? It's like this thing was written by someone who does know English, but has only been learning it in writing and never in vocal practice. Ensign Rivera does indeed get off his ass and shoot at them, stunning the hostage. And his boss is mad at him for it. Rivera, you're assaulting an innocent hostage! It's a stun setting! And he was your prisoner 5 seconds ago! Hold your fire, Ensign!
You colossal idiot.
How is this happening right now? Like, were those helmets on too tight or something? You know, it's a constant joke about how terrible security is in Starfleet. I made like a whole montage way back in the Star Trek Elite Force comic review about why they needed the hazard team. Because Starfleet security is just so piss poor that they get tossed around by the monster of the week or walk into force fields or whatever. But this is new! Like, people wanted me to use this clip from the Catwoman review as a new recurring gag.
Your incompetence is staggering.
But somehow that feels wholly insufficient. You have a phaser! You have a stun setting! 3 shots and boom! This situation is contained! Innocent hostage? Don't shoot? You are making Booster Gold from last week look hyper-competent by comparison!
It is a concept your limited cognitive abilities can deal with, isn't it? Or am I wasting my time with you?
But no, this whole situation gets even better. Because now, instead of stupid, we just have ridiculous. Reg Lech reaches behind himself to grab his other compatriot, and one arm throws him into the security officers. How the hell did he do that? Just deadlift a 200-pound man and toss him one-handed. He isn't some alien with super strength here. He's just some asshole from a failed human colony. The punches from an android don't even leave a mark on Q, but this dude is throwing people like they're baseballs. And he ends it by leaping over and grabbing the phaser away from the security officers, shooting them down. And then, just to really cement this guy as a dickhead, Reg Lech shoots the guy who he tossed, presumably presumably killing him. Learned one thing from being involved with Q. I'm better off on my own. Apparently so. Why do you even need the phaser at this point? You could probably just punch through walls and stuff. Tasha goes looking for the captain on the bridge, having tried to page him several times, but Worf just says he left orders not to be disturbed. Inside his ready room, okay, yet again, clearly the comic creators were given, like, a paragraph describing stuff on the ship, and not any more details, because in Picard's ready room, he has a fish tank. But on the show, it's like this round thing embedded in the wall. In the comic, it's this huge-ass tank in the middle of the room. And seriously, Picard, that is not enough room for all those fish. Or is this actually a private restaurant and you pull them out like lobsters? Anyway, he's questioning how he reacted earlier to try to stop Q from killing himself and indirectly getting Geordi killed. But enough of that self-reflection thing that'll have no impact later. He hears some noises from the bridge and investigates. And Worf has picked Tasha up off the ground and restrained her because he wanted to keep her from talking to the captain because of his wish not to be disturbed. Oh, and the reason she needed to talk to him? Because she has learned that Reg Lech escaped and needed to inform him of that. So, in order of stupidity, Worf restraining his superior officer because of important business, Yar not calling an intruder alert aboard the entire ship for the escaped prisoner, and Picard not answering Yar's communications because he wanted to stare at his fish in self-pity. Is there anybody on this ship who's actually good at their job? Until yesterday, I might have been concerned for myself. Reg Lech represented a part of my life that I'd feared might come back to haunt me. Facing up to him, I have faced up to my deep, irrational fears. If he comes for me this time, sir, I know I can handle him. Okay, Tasha. 1, that is great that you have overcome your trauma regarding this guy. Good for you. 2, it is not irrational fears to be worried about someone who caused said traumas through their assaults. 3, Picard is not Troy. You don't have to explain all this to him. Just sound the red alert! Picard, on the other hand, still has a deep, irrational need to shake Worf's hand anytime he sees him. She thinks he might go after someone else, and Worf says he might go after Q for their earlier confrontation. Wait, do you guys not have security in sickbay around Q already? Especially when he already declared a desire to kill himself? I'm starting to think that the reason we had rotating chief engineers in Season 1 of TNG was because they were embarrassed to be on a ship full of morons. Q finally starts coming to, and Crusher moves over to work on Geordi. Doctor, could all of the time you spent with Q have cost Geordi his life? Deanna, Q was in worse shape. Q just fainted! Geordi was shot! And wait, where the hell are all the other doctors and nurses for the ship? Are they the ones who are locked in the brig right now? Why do the Q think that these idiots deserve to be ascended to godhood? We head over to Data and Wesley playing Hollow Ball, which apparently consists of hitting a ball that has a sharp pyramid on it through a triangular hole above them so they can try to catch the ball in a stick with a triangle cut out of it for the pyramid. And apparently you can bounce the ball on your head. You know, the ball with the sharp pyramid on it. I'm starting to think they invented this game so they could covertly assassinate Wesley. Data is feeling depressed because of Geordi, because why not at this point? Data is basically no different than any other human. Hell, it even looks like the colorist just put regular skin on him as opposed to his actual ghost white appearance. Whatever. Reg Lech shows up in sickbay and puts a phaser to Q's head, much to his delight.
Idiot.
However, before he can use it, Tasha and Picard arrive and shoot the phaser out of his hand. Q remains confused about why they'd try to help him. Reg Lech pulls a second phaser and gets in close enough to Geordi to threaten him. Reg Lech, their ally LaForge is helpless. Take my life instead. Forget it, Q. I tried you already. These humans don't give a damn what happens to you. They literally shot the phaser out of your hand to keep you from killing him or anyone else. Are you as stupid as everyone else around here? Actually, you are, because you just referred to them as humans as if you weren't one too. Data enters and goes to defend Geordi. Reg Lech shoots him, but the phaser seems to have little to no effect on him. And I say little, since the only indication that it affects him at all is because his speech starts to slow. However, despite that, he clearly gets in range of the phaser to take it from Reg Lech, But Q decides now is the right time to sacrifice himself, leaping into the path of the phaser to try to save them all. Data shuts down, having apparently been run down by the phaser hits but otherwise not harmed. Q is dead for 5 seconds, and he sits up. The collective Q tells me I have passed their test. My selfless act in Data's defense has allowed me to rejoin the Q. Your examples to me have finally given the Q humanity. It's the least we can do to return the favor. So basically the same thing as that Q episode I mentioned earlier where he was turned human, except vastly inferior because this does not feature a mariachi band. And thus his method of returning the favor of humanity is to restore Geordi to life. Which, based on the lesson they learned from the previous Q episode to this, where Riker got the power of the Q, is actually a bad thing. Because Picard praised Riker for not resurrecting a dead little girl with his powers. Oh, but I'm sure it's okay because it's someone they know this time. And so our comic ends with Picard giving a log entry explaining that now that Q is gone and they've handed over Reg Lech and his people to the authorities, they can finally finish off this miniseries seeking out the legendary planet Faltos, as they had intended to. And as ridiculous as this sounds, I cannot help feeling we could have used someone like Q at our side in this trek. You mean the suicidal guy who earlier kept giving you confused, vague information and trying to get you to shoot at other people for no reason? Yeah, makes sense with the rest of the intelligent decisions you guys have made today. This comic sucks! Just wow, the writing on this one was atrocious. It's amazing how utterly pointless this all felt, especially for a 3-parter. Q is written all over the place, no doubt as a result of the creators not knowing anything about him, or much of anything else about the characters. The worst part is that nobody comes across as even the slightest bit competent at their jobs. Everyone is dumb in some capacity, and it makes for a frustrating read. The only positive I'll give this issue is that the artwork is not as ludicrously terrible as the last few issues. They're not using ballet dancers for models of the characters like they have before, but it still contains a lot of artistic weirdness, especially during the fight scene in the brig. Just terrible. Shocked that they even bothered relaunching the TNG comics after this fiasco. Next time, we continue with the ridiculous, but a fun kind of ridiculous, as we take our annual look at Mr. T with the final issue of Marvel's A-Team comic. Hello my friends, please be sure to like this video, subscribe, hit the bell, and share it with others. And if you get a chance, maybe check out my Patreon.